All right, Mayor, we're ready.
Welcome, everyone. Today is April 22nd, 2026. We are here at Hollywood City Hall for a City Commission workshop, actually the third workshop concerning this particular subject, utility system improvements, and of course, the long discussed endeavor for septic to sewer conversion for the City of Hollywood. So welcome, City Manager. Happy to see Vin Morello here ready at the podium, Manager, but I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. As you all know, the City of Hollywood is moving into a phase of significant investment in stormwater infrastructure and septic to sewer infrastructure and utilities improvements generally. These are incredibly important investments in our community, and as we have learned, these types of things don't get less costly going forward. When we delay them, they only end up getting more costly. And so we've looked very carefully at those as you have those costs as you've directed, and Vin Morello and the utilities team, along with our consultants, have been meeting with you, gathering your input, working to refine this, and are happy to present this information to you today. And with that, I will turn it over to our utilities director, Vin Morello.
Good morning, Vin Morello, Director of Utilities. The Department of Utilities has been working consistently on the master plans, the water and wastewater master plans, with our partner consultants, Hazen & Sawyer, Arcadis, Hazen & Sawyer for the wastewater plan, Arcadis for the water master plan, and with Stantec as the rate consultant. We have a relatively shorter presentation today, only 25 slides, because we've covered so much ground already. In the prior workshops, we've reached a consensus to adopt the water and wastewater master plans. We've reached a consensus on the 5-year CIP and core infrastructure. We've reached a consensus on a 25-year septic to sewer program, which we have given a working title of Waterworks 2050 to. And on the last bullet there, we've got direction, and we have consensus on some changes to the sewer ordinances, which we are working on concurrently. But today's presentation is about the rate structure. We're going to present 4 options to the Commission today, looking for direction. Essentially, the first option 1 is the core plan. That is the minimum necessary investment for this city to stay in the utility business responsibly, and to maintain its position as the regional utility for Southern Broward County. That will be that investment with a 50% debt structure. The option 2 would be that minimum investment plus the septic to sewer program with a 50% debt structure. Option 3 would be the core option again, but with a 60% debt structure, and then the option 4 would be 60% debt structure with the Waterworks 2050 plan. In the prior presentation, prior workshop, I presented a slide with an aerial photo of the wastewater treatment plant showing all of the failures in recent years. And the question arose, how did the plant arrive in such a state of disrepair and deferred maintenance? So we looked for a way to illustrate that, and we came up with this. The U.S. has a CPI index specific to the water and sewer vertical, specific to the water and sewer industry. And so the orange line at the top of the orange line here is the U.S. CPI index. That's the rate of investment all of the utilities in the country have been investing in their utility. In that same period of time, the black line indicates the rate of investment the city has made in its utility. And obviously, you can see the gap there is the consequences of deferred maintenance that we're seeing in the plant today. The bottom graph is there is a U.S. EPA index for affordability. It compares the ratio of water and sewer rates of a community to that community's median household income. We plugged in the last 10 years of rates to the Hollywood's median household income, adjusted for inflation, and you can see that it's relatively flat, if not declining altogether. So the plan proposed in the last workshop remains the same. What the utility is proposing is this. The orange line represents the urgently needed repairs for the core infrastructure program. That's the $786 million that we've referred to before. It's both $222 million for water infrastructure, of which approximately $95 million of that is just for the PFAS conversion of the water treatment plant. And the balance of $560 million is for the wastewater treatment plant and various important critical infrastructure, such as pump stations and capacity. What the utility department is proposing is that in that same intervening 5 years, we are already progressing on our stormwater master plan, so that's rolling along. And we're completing those interim improvement projects in this same 5-year period before we ramp up for the $300 million infrastructure investment that would be needed in the second half of the decade. What the Department of Public Utilities is recommending is that we make a Waterworks 2050 plan, which is a $45 million investment on top of the $786 million that will keep the momentum going on septic to sewer. That will allow sufficient funding to fund design for the first 2 phases. So we agreed on a 25-year program. So that's 5 5-year phases. This investment here, shown in the green between 2026 and 2031, is the design of the first 2 phases of that program. So why do that? What's the incentive and the advantage of making that investment? We'll be able to design the first phase of the program. Also incorporating in, there was some additional design work done on Beverly Park, Driftwood, and North Central. Those programs are all in the phase 2 of the septic to sewer program. They were paused at approximately 50% design, so we'll be able to gain some efficiency picking those up and incorporating those into the initial design phase. At the same time, in that initial 5 years, we'll be able to roll out an enhanced community outreach program. We'll be able to give citizens a better idea of when septic to sewer will reach their neighborhood, what the costs are, what the owner responsibilities are, what the benefits are, and be able to get feedback. Also at that same time, we'll be able to integrate the stormwater program into the septic to sewer program so that we can have an integrated neighborhood approach, so we can do both stormwater improvements and septic to sewer conversions in the same project, so that we're not revisiting the same area twice. And to that point, we'll also be able to work with the other city departments to come up with streetscape and beautification projects to sort of top off the utility work, so that they'll be able to come up with entrance features, maybe enhanced swale design, maybe with native plants, maybe some bollards, depending on what their particular neighborhoods want or need. And then lastly, having these septic to sewer projects fully designed qualifies them for any shovel-ready grants that may become available. Certainly, WIFIA loans require projects to be about 95 to 100% designed to qualify, and that's about the best interest rate that you can get, and they lend at about 49% of the project's value. So we took all of the master plans, we overlaid them on a complex GIS map just to kind of see what projects overlay, what requirements, utility requirements there are. And what that looks like is from there we prioritized, we met with each of the commissioners in one-on-one, we met with different departments, we got an idea of the priorities for the city, and deriving from that, we came up with the 5-phase, 5-year per phase, 25-year program. So the first phase of septic to sewer would look physically like this. These are the first areas identified. That's phase 1. Phase 2 program, again, picking up those projects that had begun design previously. Phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5. So when we speak of financing a program, what does that look like? The utility took the conventional approach, which is a 50% debt-funded program. That is, most utilities follow this conventional approach of 50% debt, 50% cash. because it's the most fiduciary and responsible way to do it, provides the most flexibility. What that looks like in real terms, comparing just the core program here, you see the bar chart on the left shows the escalating CIP investment each year. The bar chart on the right shows when we would be obtaining bonds to fund that program. So in 2026, there's no real bond, but we do have some SRF funds planned. In 27 would be about a $110 million bond. That would carry us to 2029, where there would be about a $175 million bond, and then carrying us to 2031, which would be about a $75 billion bond. And of course, as we get to each bond, we're actually looking very granularly at the rate of progress and how much funds we need. So this is just all a model today. So what does that look like in terms of rates for the public? The core program is what would look like is a 25% increase for water and sewer rates for each year for the first 3 years. Then it would level off to 5%, then 3.5%, and working towards a cumulative rate of 112%. That is to say, what people pay today would be 112% more in the year 2031. What that looks like in terms of cash flow is this, the graph on the right. The orange is the cash out, that's the CIP investment. The black line is the revenue in. Obviously, there's a gap. We make up with that gap by drawing from reserves, the purple bars here. And that's how we would draw until we get the bond funding, and then we have good debt coverage. What do these percentages look like in terms of real rate real payments monthly for residents? We wanted to evaluate what the real community impacts are for these proposed rate increases. So we looked to EPA. They have an affordability guideline. And so we plugged in our rates to the EPA's affordability guidelines. A rate that is with less than 2.5% of monthly household income is considered generally affordable by this metric. Anything between 2.5% and 3.5% monthly household income is considered a moderate burden or an early warning range. Above 3.5% is high, a potential community level of stress, and severe is above 4.5%. We plugged our last 10 years of rates into this model, and the bottom graph there, you can see in each case that we're well below the generally affordable or no impact to the community. So then we took the main use case that we've been using in all the workshops, the 6,500 cubic feet per month. We plugged in that, so that 25% per year increase for the first 3 years, accumulating in 112.3% increase 5 years down the road. So the ratepayer that's paying $98.96 a month today for water and sewer would be paying $210 a month in the year 2031 for that same quantity of water. The water-only customers, that is the septic customers, will also see a rate increase because, as I said, $222 million of that $786 million core program is for the water system, principally PFAS, among other reliability improvements. So that customer today is paying $33.25 a month. They can, without tying to the septic system, in 2031, their rate will be around $70.59. And that's the main use case. We plugged those rates into the EPA affordability guideline, and in this case, they nose up into the moderate burden level in the out years, 2029 through 2031, just touching up against above the 2.5%, so they're at 2.8 through 2.88. So WaterWorks 2050, what is the concept of it? It's taking $45 million to invest in the design of the first 2 phases. What it represents is a 3.25% increase on top of the core program. It allows us to refine the financing plan. We're still speaking with outside counsel We believe we're in compliance, and so this gives us a limited exposure, a limited investment to advance the program while we work out the details of full financing. If necessary, we can hold the funds in reserve, but it'll allow us to start the septic to soil construction projects beyond our 5-year rate window. And so there in the bar chart on the left just shows the core program in blue and the incrementally larger Waterworks 2050 program in green. So here's what their rates look like for the Waterworks 2050 program. Same increase on the water, 25% year over year for the first 3 years, leveling off to 2.5% in the out years. In the wastewater, with that 3.25% incremental increase for the septic to SOAR, that rate is now 28.25% for the first 3 years, year over year, leveling off to 5.75% in the out years, resulting in 125, nearly 126% increase cumulatively 5 years down the road. What that translates into is the customer that's paying $98.96 a month today would be paying $223 and change in 2031 for the same water. We plug those Waterworks 2050 rates into the EPA affordability guidelines, and it still comes into the moderate burden and slightly higher, but about the same. So now we've taken all of the use cases, all of the utility use cases there. Then the red, boxed in red, is that main use case of 6,500 cubic feet of water per month, just to give you a reference point. And all the other use cases are pointed out, and all the bills for both core program and Waterworks 2050 appear in the columns on the far right. We then plugged in those rates into what people see on their bill. Is not just water and sewer. They see the stormwater component and they see the sanitation component. So we've plugged in so that $98.96 a month customer is paying really $168, which includes a $22 per month stormwater component and a $47 per month sanitation fee. We've made all the adjustments out through 2031. We've even adjusted the stormwater program because we're familiar with that, and we understand that there'll be some adjustments necessary in the future as we get to the larger construction projects. Sanitation we've left the same, but I think you can interpolate. That reflects the total bill. So the $168 bill today would look like a $291 bill 5 years from now, or a $304 bill per month 5 years from now. We then placed our rate, today's rate, among the other utilities, and we're there in the middle. But the footnote to this is that some of these utilities are our large users, so their rates will go up correspondingly with our rates. And also some of the utilities that aren't our large users are confronted with some of the same regulatory challenges that we are, such as biosolids handling. So all of these rates will be reshuffled. We don't know what that looks like. We're just showing where we stand today with everything being equal. We then plugged in next year's rates, the proposed first year of rate increase, what that looks like. Again, not at the top of the pack, but for the money invested here, we know we're giving you $800 million worth of infrastructure, whereas these other utilities, they don't have major programs, certainly not Davie. Fort Lauderdale has a water plant, but the other utilities on the far right, they're all our large users, so they can expect to see rates increase correspondingly. So again, we landed on all the use cases represented here with the 50% debt plan. So we gave further consideration, and we thought, what else can we do to mitigate the rate increases? So we looked at a 60% rate plan. And so what are the advantages of the 50% debt? Why do most utilities do that? And what if you did 60%? What are the pros and cons of that? So the 50% debt, the reason they do that is because it offers the most financial flexibility, gives you good debt coverage, makes you attractive to bond issuers, which is reflected in your rates. It supports stable and predictable rate adjustments. And it retains a little bit of maneuvering room for future priorities because there's always regulatory changes on the horizon that we're not aware of that could be imposed that will need additional capital to address. If you raise it to 60%, the benefits are it defers the near-term rate increases, so it mitigates those a little bit, but eventually you'll see in the next charts it increases them later on. And then the risk, it increases the fixed obligations, reduces financial flexibility, and it tightens the debt service coverage margins, which makes us less attractive to bond issuers. So we plugged all of the same data into the 60% debt model, and what that translated into, rather than a 25% year-over-year increase, it is reduced to a 21% year-over-year increase for the first 3 years. But then, rather than leveling off at 5% and 3.25%, it levels off at 7% in the out years and 4% in the subsequent year. So this is the core program at 60% debt, so that main use case ratepayer of $98.96 is now, their rate is $195 per month in year 5. We plugged these rates into the EPA affordability guideline to see if there was any benefit. Not much, it's still in the moderate, just noses into the moderate burden range there. We then plugged the rates in the WaterWorks 2050 program to 60% debt. Same thing, 21% year over year. With the 3% adder for septic to sewer, it's 23.5% for wastewater for the first 3 years. Levels off much higher at 6 and 8.5%. Cumulative rate increase of 107%, meaning the WaterWorks 2050 program, that main use case of 6,500 cubic feet per month translates from $99 a month to $205 a month for the same water in 2031. Again, no substantial impact on the EPA affordability guidelines. It's still above 2.5% and therefore of the moderate burden. Here we've put in all the use cases at the 60% debt plan. So you can look at your reference point there of the main use case, 195 versus 205. Here now, in this next to last slide, we've put all of the options, option 1 being the one in the dashed green, and by no means the recommended option, is just to number them left to right. The core program for the 50% debt is 210. The WaterWorks 2050 program at 50% debt is 223. The core program at 60% debt is 195, and the WaterWorks 2050 program at 60% debt is 205. And all the use cases are there. And then lastly, we've taken all of the EPA affordability guideline metrics and put them on the same slide for just convenience of comparison. But really today's discussion is if there's any consensus on any of these 4 options. That's the presentation.
Well, thank you, Vin. Thank you to the team for all the work that's gone into this, the consultants. Really, I know this is a big undertaking, and it's clearly a comprehensive and long-term plan. I think everyone understands that the improvements and the repairs that you've indicated the wastewater plant requires leaves us with the understanding that doing nothing is not an option. The dollars that you're presenting for the wastewater plant improvements are incredibly significant, 700 plus million, even though you subtract the PFAS and you're at 500 some odd million. I know a portion of that, if you'll just please on the record discuss how the large users fit into all of this.
Certainly. Well, we have a parking lot slide. If I could get some assistance from the consultant to locate that slide. I think they pay roughly a third. Thank you.
Just good for everyone to know.
Yeah, we have I wish there was a less clunky way to get to the slide, but
That's okay.
Well, they're calling it up, I think, from memory, it's about a third, 30%.
About 30%, roughly. I guess while they're.
I see it there on the screen.
Yeah. Get in there.
It gets so much easier when you're at your desk and you do it.
It's okay. We have time.
So 33.9, am I reading that right?
Maybe you could run through a little bit, just walk us through this slide so we all have a good understanding.
Sure. So what we did was, so what you're asking is the large user share. So the large user share is principally or only involved in the wastewater treatment plant and some select transmission system improvements. So we grouped those into some categories. The consent order compliance is about 155 million of that cost that's considered for large user share. The biosolids upgrades, which we have to make those investments, about 130 million. The regional facility buy-in, we're working on some options, but for today's discussion, it's about 78 million. And reuse expansion, 15 million. We're still, we're under the ocean outfall rule, we're still obligated to produce, I think, 10 MGD of reclaimed water. Our system doesn't give us water that it has too high of a salinity for us to use, so we have to work with outside partners to provide us wastewater. And so it's difficult for us to get to that goal, but the last 4 MGD is going to cost us about $15 million to achieve that requirement. Other critical wastewater plant upgrades, these are all failing components. For example, the oxygen plant, which right now is only operating at 85% efficiency, and a number of other sludge pump stations within the plant. Collection and transmission rehab, those are the attributable to the large users, 38 million for those. Plant electrical upgrades, $8 million, and redundant electrical feed from FPNL, 6 million at the time of this preparation of this slide. So when we take all of those costs and we bundle them together and attribute what the large users portion would be, they're paying about 34%.
So Vin, all of the affordability metrics and the demonstration of what the proposed rate would do for the monthly household bills and business bills all rely on this cost share with the large users. My question is, are any of these percentage shares by the large users elective, or under the agreements there is a guarantee that the cost share comes in, because we're relying on this cost share for projecting the rest of the impact to our own customers?
To my understanding, the large users do not have
An
a
elective
say,
choice.
an elective choice. This is where we, as the regional utility, are telling them, based on the consent order and based on the condition of the plant, as I've advised you, these are required.
And as far as when the large users and how they pay in and their own increases in rates, was the expectation as to when those dollars comes in taken into account when we?
The precise timing, I don't know, but I imagine they
And your
fall in step.
consultants here are nodding yes. Do you
Yeah.
want to come up?
Yeah, I'll let them come up and speak, but yes, they would fall in place at the same time the rate increases are seen by the residents.
Hold on. Commissioner Sharon wants to follow up on that quick point.
It was just exactly my question. So if you go to slide 15. Oh, I'm sorry, 17.
Well, I'm getting a little flack, so keep it on point to where I was going.
I'm sorry, it must be 15. Yeah, right here. When you're looking, to your point, when we were looking where we fell in line with the other cities were way lower, and Vin said something about that's because we haven't applied to their rates the same impact of these changes that we would have. Correct. But if they're large users, can we see what that impact would be to their rates as like an assumption? So Hollywood wouldn't be second to highest anymore, I'm assuming. It would be more in the middle because they're all going to feel this pain as well. That's it.
I mean,
Sure. Eric Grau, principal of Stantec Consulting. Yeah, the challenge is that while it's a big cost to each of those utilities, to each of those large users, it's we don't know. It's blended in with all their other costs, so we don't know what kind of impact dollar for dollar will trickle down to their ratepayers. I will say, in this chart specifically, what we are showing are only those from the preceding chart that have already published their rate increases for next year. That's why this is a smaller survey sample. But to Vin's point, you know, starting potentially as soon as next year, many of the our neighboring agencies are going to be, dealing with these same cost pressures. The biosolids facility, aging infrastructure, the regulatory mandates that are coming down from the state and the federal government. So, yeah, we would anticipate everyone to increase. So to answer your question, it's hard to say how that would translate. If we figure about a third of the increase that we're proposing gets passed down to the large users, that's an additional 9 to 10% of cost increase that we would be passing down to the large users annually.
Thank you. So obviously, I know commissioners I'm gonna call on them in a moment, but clearly the big factors here are affordability, the timing. It's a pretty aggressive path of the rate increases at 25% a year for the next 3 years. We're seeing a 5-year snapshot here, and so just quickly on the outset, while this is a 25-year endeavor, what the years 5 through 10 and 10 through 15 and 15 through 20, et cetera, look like? I know we're ramping here and looking at the immediate cost, but.
Yeah, we don't typically recommend beyond 5 years rate adjustments because we just don't know what's out there. It's hard enough to predict 5 years out. But we do look beyond in our modeling because we want to know what dragons there might be, out there on the horizon. Based on the 250% debt-funded options, beyond the 5-year rate plan, so starting in 2032, we're projecting 2.5% across the board. So inflationary type increases will fund all the requirements that we've identified today, as well as the debt service that's associated, and it would maintain our debt service coverage at above 2 times, or rather our net revenues above 2 times the debt service throughout a 30-year forecast.
Does that include like a utility renewal replacement policy that captures and retains dollars for capital improvements in a better form than the utility has in the past? Other cities, set aside, say, 4% or whatever percent a year, and that ends up creating a capital improvement fund. Here we have capital improvement requirements that are in the hundreds of millions that are beyond our own reserve and our own. Does the utility, I don't know if the question is to Vin, do we have a formal utility renewal and replacement policy like other cities do?
Good morning, Mayor Commission. Phyllis Shaw, Deputy Director. Yes, we do, and it is also part of our bond ordinance.
And what percentage does that policy call for like reserve retention and to continue to contribute to the capital fund every year?
For our CIP, it's about 4%.
4%.
Yes, sir.
I gotcha. And what does that have in it today? Do you know?
It's about $15 million, and it's usually a percentage of our depreciation cost. So if our depreciation is $25 million, it is the amount that we should be setting aside. But based on our revenue and costs, it's about $15 million right now.
So if there's only $15 million in the fund, does that reflect us in recent years or in past 10 years having to draw into a bigger balance that existed with only 15 left, or is the amount created every year just amounting to that low figure versus, you know, what we see the expenses actually are?
So yes, anytime we're having any issues and we're unable to, like for example, when we had a 48-inch break,
Right.
we had to draw from that to be able to cover it because we didn't have money set aside. So when we have emergencies or when we have issues that arises that we need to put in capital dollars, we draw from it. Yes, sir.
Do you believe that the 4% or whatever, however many dollars the policy currently retains and sets aside, is that sufficient? And is that reflected in the next 25-year horizon, or do you foresee the policy needing to be a little more aggressive?
Thank you. It needs to be around 10 to 15%. We'll be coming to you hopefully probably by the next rate study to increase that. But in the meantime, we'll also be coming to you to update the ordinance.
So do these figures here count in the revenue needing to generate and related to the expenses that the utility is going to have the opportunity and the ability to retain 10 to 15%, or no? Or is that going to require, if we want to get to that level of retention for future capital, because it's not going to end,
Right.
does this take into account the 10 to 15% endeavor?
No, not the increasing, no. It just preserves the current policy.
Which is a
Going forward.
deficit that we're seeing. Or you could say not enough. Yeah.
Sure, not enough.
All right. So we just have to face it with face it in black and white. In the end, I know the commissioners and myself, we're all concerned about the rate path and the front loading of the expense at 25 or 21% a year in the first 3-4 years, and getting to basically a doubling of the impact to the customer in 5. And yet you say that the years 5 through 10 and beyond are averaging, say, a 2%. So my question is, and forgive me for not really going in this direction during our one-on-ones, we were more concerned with, how can we fluctuate the level of borrowing, the debt ratio, to see if we can reduce the burden. But we see that when we reduce we increase from 50 to 60%, it doesn't really create so much of a savings to the customer. That it almost makes sense to go 50%, and it seems to be, and leave the financial flexibility with the utility to be a little more, bond positive and get better rates and what have you. But the question is there a way to still fund what we need, and what would be the impacted cost of smoothing this out in a longer way? In other words, not really front-loading the 25% increases so heavy in the first 3-4 years, but rather looking at a 10-year horizon or a 15, and having a more gradual impact on bills over time. It's worth the question here. I know it's a little bit of a backtrack to how aggressive the utility wants to be, but when we look at these affordability issues, and the median household income comparison is all great, and it seems to be in line, but we have to remember that many of the residents in Hollywood don't make the median and are more the 25% kind of level. And the impact on them, the ratio would probably hit it into the moderate and high impact. So that's our trouble, I think, as the policymakers, is what obviously is the impact to the customer, and can the customer afford this? We'd love for all the work to start tomorrow. And so the crux of the question is how have we studied a 10-year picture and a slower ramp up of the dollars? I know we want to get dollars up front so we can have functional capital and be ready for a 50-50. But is there another way?
So I'll address the smoothing part. Unfortunately, given the capital needs that have been identified in the near term, that really is what's needed through the next 3 years. I mean, we're coming,
So let me just clarify.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, yes, from a mathematical standpoint, you could smooth and level, but the reality is we're under a consent order that's a 5-year time horizon, and so all the work, that's when he speaks of capital needs, that's what's driving the
Is that
capital.
the 780 million, Vin?
Well,
That consent
well,
order cover?
PFAS
not
is
all of
100,
it.
PFAS is 100 million and must be constructed within the next 3 years. That's on the water side. And
Okay.
on the wastewater side, all of the consent order items, along with all the other reliability items to keep us from getting further failures. We just had a sludge break in the plant Monday that caused a spill that was announced on social media. Oxygen plant is operating at 85% purity. What that means is we have to operate, the retention time for the treatment process is longer, and it's at a risk of failure. If the oxygen plant fails, then we have to truck in oxygen at $20,000 per truckload, and the truckload lasts a day, maybe two. Fort Lauderdale, I'm told, is spending their oxygen plant has failed, and they are also under a consent order, and they're spending upwards of $200,000 a month.
So Vin, the question is
oxygen.
not, again, the question is not, is the work necessary? We know it is. The question was really, and if we don't have an answer today, that's fine. The question is can it be smooth? I guess you're saying that it's not.
as
that
long
we
as
need-
the capital can be smoothed, then the rate plan can be smoothed to a greater extent. But it's this consent order. I don't know that there's much room for that. I mean, Vin can speak.
Yeah, I guess what you're saying is that this financing plan takes into account the work that's needed, the time that it's needed in, and the ability to borrow and have enough of a reduction in the borrowing share to keep it at 50-50.
Correct.
Cash versus debt.
Yep, balancing any available cash on hand that we have to help to mitigate the rate increases. Yeah, I mean, it's a balance of those different components.
Well, yeah, listen, it's obviously a big impact. So let's open it up to the commissioners to reflect on this. Commissioner Gruber.
Thank you. Can we, thank you for the presentation. I know you guys have been working hard on this, and I know it's something we need to do. Can we go to slide 14? Going back to the large users that the mayor was talking about. So one of my biggest concerns with this, I've got a lot of concerns with this, is the impact on large families. And we already have this weird type of, almost in my opinion, discriminatory type of billing that goes to larger households, in which once you reach a certain amount of water, and correct me if I'm wrong, then the rate per I forget how you, just per square, per cubic foot goes up, correct?
It's a tiered rate or something like the income tax where everybody's taxes, the rate is the same for 0 through 500 cubic feet. And then for a cubic foot above 500 cubic feet, it's a different rate. And then above 1,500 cubic feet, it goes into that
Right.
extreme rate. So you're paying that incremental difference for that 1,501st cubic foot of water use.
Right. So that just doesn't seem fair to me, that a household of two would pay less per unit of water than a big family. And that's what that's created there. From my understanding, that came about at a time when we were having droughts and we wanted people to save water. I still don't understand how that could have been the solution, just because, what's that? Okay. Okay.
So if I could follow up on that, Vin, talk about the tiered structure then, and whether or not, if that were to be changed and be an equal figure, I
That's
guess
where
that would
that's where I was
increase.
going. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I guess that's the question he's positing is the fairness of the tiered structure, penalizing higher consumption, probably for the sake of conservation, but in the end, if we admit that there are large families that don't have a choice, they could be just as water, conserving as other families, but they just have more people in the household, and so. What's your reflection on the tiered structure versus a flat?
you know, I'm only speaking to the structure as it is.
Yep.
I haven't done any evaluation on changing the tiered structure. I think Phyllis Shaw might have some insight into the history of it. But, you know, it seems like it's using that two-person family to the six-person family comparison. They're spending the same rate for 500 to 1,500 gallons, and then if they go over, you know, that 1,500 first gallon, that's when the six-person family is paying more for their cubic foot and anything above that. But
Right. And we're essentially telling that six-person family they need to take shorter showers than the two-person.
Well,
That's how I see it. I don't know. Yeah.
so I know you guys weren't prepared to really talk about the tiered versus the flat, but maybe for a future exercise, we want to see if we
Yeah,
do
yeah.
change
No,
to a flat.
I did bring it up in our one-on-ones, and I did bring it up actually in the last meeting, and I think staff was going to look into it as well. So, yeah.
Yes, sir, you did. So the tier structure was put into place many years ago. Of course, part of it was a water conservation issue with the South Florida Water Management District, which is still in effect, number one. Number two, the tier structure is used by all utilities within South Florida, actually across Florida and other places. What we did say is we'll look at a rate study, because this was not a rate study. This was just to look at rate sufficiency to see what we're able to afford and then put some revenue in place to afford those critical projects. So in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll look at a rate structure. The rate structure will take into effect all of the different rate structure, looking at how well we can still maintain the utility costs, but also provide support for all of our families and businesses across the city.
Right. And I appreciate that. I know it's kind of a different lane, but just focusing that leads me to when we get into the larger household that's going to go from $194 a month to $435 a month, did we take into account the EPA Affordable Index on them, or are we just doing the typical household?
We did it just on the typical household. A detailed cost of service study, which is what would inform a new rate structure if one is warranted.
Right.
It's from that exercise, that evaluation, that we would determine, okay, what actually is the makeup of our customer base? How much, you know, what really is the typical, right? Is it still 6.5? What's, you know, what percentage of the population is maybe on fixed income, you know, one person not working at home? And, you know, kind of how many single-family residences are using above the high, you know, in that third tier of the rate. So we would kind of have all that, and on a revenue-neutral basis, say, okay, how can we massage it around to achieve whatever our objectives might be at that time?
Right. So it's safe to say that if we added that the EPA Affordable Index guideline to the larger household, we might find that the burden is high.
Possibly, I'd have to check
Right.
that. I did. I reran that current survey. I don't. Maybe you can help her find which slide it is.
Well, if you consider a low-income large household, then they're really impacted. You know,
Right. Now, we ran our rate survey. We showed it, you know, where we compare us to the region. We were right smack in the middle with the typical bill. We reran that with all the other bills calculated at a low user. So I think it was 4 CCF. Hollywood fell to 4th lowest on that chart relative to their peers. And then we looked at it on the high metrics, so we at the 13 CCF, and that moved Hollywood from dead center to 4th from the left. So we moved up a little bit, but we're still 4th from the left. We then reran it at 16, just to say an even higher number, kind of thinking of your example, just kind of going a little more extreme. And when we ran that one, Hollywood was in the same relative position. It doesn't mean that the customer is not going to feel the impact, but I'm just saying that relative to your neighbors, the rate structure does not appear to be so prohibitive at the higher end.
Right. And I don't know, like, you can look at that in different ways. You can then argue the point that, well, we have a higher millage rate than our neighbors I get relative to the neighbors, but just looking at what the increase is going to be to a large household, looking it up this morning, 62.5% of renters in Hollywood are cost burdened. 44.3 homeowners with a mortgage in the city are also cost burdened, and over 7,200 households are severely cost burdened. So what that says to me, let's take the 7,200 households, they can't afford that increase. So those 7,200 households will not be able to afford to live here.
And it's a real big problem.
Yeah, so especially the large households. Let's just take, the large households. The small households of those 7,200 aren't going to be able to, absorb this. The large households, so what happens? Then we lose, 500 hospital workers, a couple hundred people become homeless. The rest, you just leave. I wouldn't stay here if I was in that position. I'd move. So, it's a challenge. I know we have to figure out how to pay it, but these are realities that if we put this into play, go talk to those 7,200 households after their bill goes up that much.
So if I could, maybe it might help, because I know the affordability is going to be top of mind for all of us up here. Can you translate the 25% a year and what that means in cash so we can evaluate if we can raise those dollars in a broader way in a separate fashion and not necessarily hit the utility bill as hard as it can? Like, what does 25% a year mean in the first year in terms of money raised? How much extra money?
I'm going off of memory, but I think it's about $25 million.
25
My
million.
assistant will look it up, but yeah. it's
So
about-
if we were to look to add $25 million of revenue in millage versus the water bill, what is then the average cost to a household? Because and we're allowed to raise through millage. I imagine there's not I never thought I'd have to say this, but looking at the limited pool of customers here, if we spread that out in a millage fashion, what does that mean to the average business, average household, and is that a more absorbable issue? Indeed. I just thought this would maybe bridge an opportunity, and then I'll stop.
So I did some pretty simple analyses to estimate what the monthly income or monthly cost might be to a resident under different approaches to funding. If we did a residential, so if we did a benefit assessment for the residences, that's going to be the most expensive. We figure on average, and it's going to be neighborhood specific because you're paying for the benefit of the assets.
Right.
We're looking at about $434 per month for 30 years, and that would be just about 17,000 accounts would be paying that.
Right.
If we put it on the millage rate, based on my back of the envelope calculation here, we come up with $74 for all residents of this, all 55,000 for 30 each month for 30 years.
Each month?
Yeah, I broke it down to monthly. So it's 74 times 12. Yep. And if we do it on the rate, if we do it on the estimated rate impacts, so looking at that typical bill, the 6.5, they're going to pay over 30 years an average of $17 more per month on the utility bill. So it's 17 versus 74 on the millage versus 434
How are you
on the
saying
assessment.
17 because we're seeing the bill double in 5 years?
No, that's taking the. Yeah, but it's taking the average in. Well, let me back up. I'm sorry. This is solely for the septic to sewer part.
I got you.
So
we don't really
multiply
have
it
a-
all. Just
We don't really have a demonstration yet on millage for every paying property owner versus water bill.
this was just on the incremental for septic to
Gotcha.
sewer, and I mean,
Probably worth an exercise in reviewing. All right, I'll go on to Commissioner.
I'm
sorry.
still going.
All right.
That's okay. I don't talk that much, so when I do, want to get it out. As far as the cost, 45 million for design, right? That's before any shovel hits the ground. I'm no expert on this, so maybe if someone could run that through? That looked like a little bit of sticker shock to me for just design without any work being done. I mean, that's what goes into that it's $45 million.
It's about 10% of $450 million constructed value. So it's $9 million a year for 5 years to, to design all those bid packages. I think there's about 12 of them.
Okay. And one last thing. Is there any place in this that we've looked at other methods, like, for example, like stormwater? What if, is it possible that if in some of the hot spots we can use eminent domain to take a handful of houses and save $100 million buying $5 million worth of real estate? Is that a possibility? Have we looked into something like that?
Yes, for stormwater, we have looked at that one. There's no $100 million savings, but
I'm just throwing that number out there, yeah.
Certainly buying, there are properties in the city for which there is no stormwater solution, and the best benefit is to buy those properties and convert them into some sort of stormwater retention area.
And is it possible that there are properties in the city where there's a stormwater solution, but the cost of the solution doesn't justify the alternative of maybe doing a take on those properties? Using eminent
Can you
domain.
restate that question?
So you said there's no stormwater solution for some properties. In that
Yes.
case, we're going to have to use that method. So is there a stormwater solution on some areas in which the solution costs so much that a better solution would be an eminent domain take on those properties that would cost significantly less? Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah, it's more black and white. There's properties for which there's no infrastructure
Right.
that can help them.
Right.
And so we're going to buy those properties to create stormwater retention. All other areas, there is a solution. And the solutions go in descending order. The least expensive for stormwater is an open body source of water to drain to the C10 canal. That's the most cost effective, or to the intracoastal. The next is exfiltration, where the geology is high enough, where the ground level is high enough above the water table, you have sufficient exfiltration depth, then exfiltration is the next less costliest solution. And then the third costly one is, well, the most costly is deep injection wells in various, and so they go through that process where they say, okay, these are the solutions, and they apply the least costly solution to that area that will be effective and achieve the level of service. But there's just a few properties where no matter what we build, those properties will be flooded, and so we'll offer to buy them.
Got it. All right, thank you. Thanks, Vin.
Just to kind of, I guess, piggyback off of what Commissioner Gruber was saying, sticker shock obviously is a really big problem. But if we can go to slide 3, just out of curiosity. The gap from 2016 to 2023, could we explain why there was such a flat rate from 2016 to 2019? Why there was no movement? And you weren't here, but somebody's explanation as to why there wasn't a movement. Was it we were just being nice? Was it because we were dealing with financial urgency and getting out of it? What was the reasoning as to why we did not increase or, do the increase as needed? And honesty, because, right, that's what we're here for. Put all of our boxing gloves down and just really find out the grassroots about what the deal is.
So being the most seasoned or the only seasoned person in utilities, part of it was because of commission. So when we came to you in 2019 and previously, we asked for certain rate increase based on the work that we needed to be done. And those rate increases based on various structures and various strategies were approved by you.
Which
Now-
means nothing was approved or denied.
Or we approve what was recommended.
Probably, that could be the case, yes.
Okay. So that to me, out of all of it, is the biggest concern because we're playing catch up now.
Correct.
This is really biting us in the you know what. So that's really concerning. In addition to what Commissioner Gruber said, I always speak about seniors. And it's really disturbing because they're on fixed incomes. They have no way of generating additional funds to cover these costs, period. And they're the longest individuals who've lived in the city and kept the city array, keep it going. If you think about it, there's approximately 3,000 homeowners that are over the age of 65 in the city of Hollywood. It doesn't seem like a lot, but those are homeowners that have been here for decades. And then we're gonna apply these fees to them in addition to everything else that's going on. It's just, to me, the worst thing we could do. And then if you go to the complete opposite side, everyone knows I'm a proponent for seniors. I constantly ask about what we can do for our seniors, how can we help them, affordable housing, all of that stuff. But then if you go to the opposite side and you have young adults that are moving into the city or want to live here, like our children who are graduates, I have 3. They want to live in the city of Hollywood because we've made it so amazing. They want to be here. They can't afford a house. If they do buy a house, they're putting themselves in major debt. Then they can't afford the taxes. Then they're never going to be able to afford. It's just a perfect storm. And so for me, it's very challenging to sit up here and say, yes, this sounds great. And yes, we understand we have to do it. And yes, we've approved the Stormwater Master Plan of $2 billion moving forward. And now the septic to sewer. But what the state mandates, from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is the only individuals who have to hook up to the septic to sewer line is the areas that there is sewer been placed. The additional conversion, while we know it is environmentally safe, as many say, and I think we can go toe-to-toe and argue with those who have septic tanks and say, I maintain my septic tank, it doesn't cause any problems. So, you have a mixed vibe there, but we're forcing something on somebody, and I'll use myself as a prime example as I'm sitting here watching this, and the best person is throw yourself into it. I'll probably be dead by the time I get sewer, and I'm 56. But I'm going to be paying a substantial amount, which I understand it's the greater good for all of the city of Hollywood, but I'm going to be paying a substantial amount of money if we push this forward for something that I will never see. And that's the selfish part of me. But the biggest challenge I have is the seniors and the new generation that's coming into the city. And really, I have to speak on behalf of District 3 because majority of the seniors live either in District 1 in the Lakes or in District 3 because of their longevity in their homes. And part of it is in District 6 too. It's Hollywood Hills, Park East, and North Central. And in North Central, most of them are definitely on fixed incomes. And the same in Hollywood Hills. I mean, we really will be pushing people out. And then who's going to come in? Because the new people can't afford it either. I asked, and I don't know if it's even possible, but I guess if you can go to the slide where it shows the septic to sewer and the stormwater, the ones with the lines and everything, that map. I don't know what number it was, I'm sorry. Or maybe it's 6 overlapping. Utility systems, yes. So if you were to take out, just hypothetically, if you were to take out the septic to sewer portion and just do the water master plan, do we have a cost what that would be by itself?
Yes, off the top of my head, I don't. Perhaps Phil Cook can shed some light.
Just the stormwater, right?
Good morning. So
Or the water master plan?
So what is shown on the graphic here in blue, those blue lines, those are water lines that are slated for replacement.
Okay,
And then what is shown in orange, that is sewer work that actually extends through some unsewered areas. So the objective here was to show all of the utility work that needed to be done. And if septic to sewer was undertaken, we wanted to combine all of that so that we did not interfere in a neighborhood more than one time, take care of it all at once.
and I'm a huge proponent of that, hypothetically. But in this scenario, I feel that we are biting off more, it'll be more detrimental to our residents than we can take. But, okay. So a couple of things, thank you for that. A couple of things, and I don't know if it can be done in maybe finance or city manager or whomever. One, have we, I know we talked about grants. I know that the state only mandates the connection for the sewer that's already in place. Could it be possible to do a bond for the full amount over a 50-year period or something of that nature to cover the costs at a lower impact to our residents? Now, granted, that would be something that has to be voted on and it would have to go on a ballot. But to me, you know, if that fails, then we have to come and really make these tough decisions. But if we could put it on get some verbiage and find out if it's possible, could it go on as a large bond to cover this huge expense over a period of time that it's not such a major impact to our residents at this moment? Is that possible?
So, I know Stan Tech's going to speak to that in a minute,
Okay.
but I just want to clarify. What we're presenting today are the nearly $800 million in core improvements that need to be done on the timeline of the consent order, PFAS, and other regulations, with a $45 million component just to keep septic to sewer moving forward, sort of a rising tide will raise all the boats. Everybody in the city will benefit in some way. But the septic to sewer program on its own is nearly $1.5 billion.
Right.
So if you're talking about a bond to fund just the $1.5 billion, I'm sure Stan Tech can speak to that. But in what we're speaking of today in this 5-year rate plan is the $45 million is septic to sewer.
Yeah, I'll just add, I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm unaware of any bonds that will cover that period of time. Usually it's, there's like a 2 to 3 year spend down period that has to occur to avoid arbitrage issues and whatnot. So I don't even know that that would be.
Well, we have extended bonds. I think that it's something, maybe Adam, I don't know if you want to just kind of educate us a little bit. I mean, 2 to 3 years to me doesn't sound like it, but if there are extended bonds, that it would actually have buy-in, because I think every resident in the city of Hollywood understands the environmental impacts that this has. But they also are challenged with how we're going to squeeze them so tight that they're probably not going to be able to live, majority of the individuals in the city. We already hear with no price adjustments as it is, how it's unaffordable. People cannot live here. They have to move and find another city, and they're going further north, and we're pushing them out. And what are we impacted with? Rentals, transient, vacation rentals. You know, and we have to sit up here and come up with creative ways to be able to help bring in profit to our city. And then we get, unfortunately, our asses handed to us for making those tough decisions, right? And then we have a war going on with our residents and the commission that we're not listening. And here we are today, sitting in a commission meeting at 10:30, which I'm sure we'll get flack about because we didn't do it at nighttime, right? But there's not a perfect time to do it. And there's a handful of residents here. over something that is so major that it will impact every single person in the city of Hollywood in a very challenging way. And so we have to be the voice. So I'm speaking up and asking, can there be a bond to help combat the costs?
So,
Yes.
Vice Mayor, let me try to address some of the things that have been raised this morning because, we've had a wide-ranging discussion, really about affordability in South Florida and specifically in Hollywood overall. And of course, that is a huge concern to all of us. And you all, as a commission, have made some significant investments and efforts related to affordability, affordable housing. It is on the radar screen at the state level. It's on the radar screen at the county level. It's on the radar screen here in Hollywood. And granted, utility bills are certainly a part of the day-to-day affordability, but they are not the only component that people are dealing with. And so I think we do need to be mindful of the fact that we are not going to solve affordability issues by deferring investments in our utility system on something that we absolutely have to have, which is clean water and a way to dispose of wastewater. And it is a core responsibility of our government to figure out a way to provide those things for our residents. So we absolutely understand that these are incredibly tough decisions. What we can look at today is we know we have a big chunk of things that we have to do, and Vin has characterized those as core things that we must do because of a consent order and because of deferred maintenance, that we will not have an operational plant unless we do those things. And so you're seeing a rate related to those items that we really need to do. And then you're seeing the septic to sewer, which is something that we want to do, and environmentally we believe is important to start laying the foundation to convert those 40% of our customers that are still on septic to a sewer system. But we need to, and we can slice and dice that a little bit. We can look at a slight millage rate increase, which may be easier for some of our folks to handle. And Adam can talk about what a 1 mil increase gives us in terms of revenue. When you start then talking about bonding for large chunks of money, just remember we did a general obligation bond for $165 million. We are talking about $1.5 billion when we talk about septic to sewer. So it becomes a little, you can pick a little bit, but there's no way to bond for the kind of money that we're talking about here that doesn't dramatically impact all of our residents. I mean, this is the cost of things, and it has to get paid for in some way. And I hate to inject this, but at the same point in time, we have a whole discussion taking place about property tax reform that could completely impact our ability to gain money through property taxes and the millage rate. So what I would encourage you all to do today is really try to focus in on, would you prefer a little more debt, the 60% versus the 50%? Would you prefer to defer some of that additional planning right now on septic to sewer and the design work on that? Is that what you are asking for in order to keep rates lower? Would you like us?
100%.
Okay, so
whatever we can do to keep the rates lower, because right now what we're being presented and asking to come up on a consensus, and I still have the floor, I'm sorry. What we have a consensus on the floor, or what we're being presented to do today, is to come up with plan A, B, or C. It's almost impossible. I would currently recommend, and I'm kind of like disappointed because I understand the do it once instead of go back and do it again. But by the time we go back and do it, it's going to be 30 years from now to some extent in some of these areas. So I would say hold off on the septic to sewer because of the costs and the ticket price, but that's just my opinion. And maybe we put it out to the voters as well to see what they want and then get the direction from them because of the cost and the burden.
Let's just keep in mind that from what we're seeing here, only $45 million for design plans for septic sewer is all that's incorporated here. In other words, we haven't even gotten to the point of even how do we pay for 1.5 billion in later years. So it'll be even more than this and even double this. So that's a real big question. Let's go to Commissioner Biederman.
So first of all, my support would be for 60% debt financing. That being said, I couldn't think of a better city manager to be in place during this critical time because she is the queen of messaging. No matter what you put in front of her, she comes up with a way to make it palatable.
Yeah.
You know, she could take some food that is bland and disgusting and throw some spices in it and make it delicious that it's going to put a smile on your face, but with words. So I couldn't think of a better person in place right now to handle this huge challenge. And I wasn't looking to be mean. I was looking to be like very complimentary.
You know, it's great.
That being said, part of that messaging needs to show a value to our residents and why this needs to be done and why we are attempting to do this. If we wanted to, and let me try and, the mayor always does this, but let me try and address Commissioner Coleri's concern that wasn't addressed. Vice Mayor Coleri. I think what the challenge is the bonds that you're talking about have to be spent over 3 years, not paid for over 3 years. And I think there was a miscommunication on that. Like the school board did $800 million and they didn't spend it quick enough or whatever it was. So if we were to bond out for $1 billion worth of sewer, we couldn't possibly spend that over 3 years. There's no possible way we could do that much construction in the city. But I do like the way you think. I just think if we were doing that, we could have done it 8 years and half the city would have been sewered by now and it would have all been sewered by a year and a half from now. On page 10, sorry, thank you. Arlene?
Stop.
Page 10.
Okay, page 10, it talks about affordability by EPA. But this is nationwide, right? So,
I'll let Stan Tech speak to it because they came up with the metric. We are by no way implying that people aren't going to feel this. It was just we searched for a metric that
I
would
know,
kind of,
we're trying to fit a metric to our problem, as Commissioner Shuham likes to point out sometimes. I like the comparing it to other cities part, because that's what people relate to. People relate to their neighbor in a different city saying, my water bill's only this much. So I think that that's where we have to fit in. We have to fit in, we talk about our competitors. Our competitors are other cities. So we need to make sure that we're fitting it into what those costs are in other cities. And I understand if our large user fees go up, their fees are gonna go up, whether it's, they might absorb some of that cost, but it is the best way to, I believe, address it. Staying on this page, affordability is in the eye of the beholder kind of thing. And it's neighborhood by neighborhood. Some neighborhoods could afford a 25% increase, and some neighborhoods can afford a 25% cost savings. So it's about perception. We talk about perception a lot. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with that part. But I think while we're trying to show that we're affordable, it's like nationwide kind of affordability, not necessarily locally. I think the sooner we do it, the better. I think if we go for 21%, the 21% increase this year and the next 2 years, it could be adjusted. You know, just because we're putting in place this 10-year plan, it's still going to be fluid, just like our master plan for building, just like every plan we have. It's all fluid and could be changed by the commission next week or after the next election. So I would like to, we don't vote on anything today, but I would like to pursue the 60% debt financing, 21%. It could always be adjusted next year. We could always luck out and get a $25 million grant from the feds or the state, you know, but, and then adjust cost savings thereon. But we need to start doing work now and not kicking the can down the road, because that's why we're in the problem we're in. We should have addressed the millage rate 8 years ago if we were going to do that. And then we could have been saving now, because, you know, we all know that costs have doubled over the last 8 years. So we don't know what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years from now. Costs may double, costs may come down. If costs come down, we can reduce those costs. But I would hate to risk costs going up again. And I know that our staff is going to do everything they can to contain costs and get the best deals around and get those grants from the state or feds. But I don't want to kick the can down the road and then, you know, next year say, well, why didn't we do something now? So I would like to push forward with the 60% debt financing.
Thank you, Commissioner Biederman. Let's go to Commissioner Hernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. We lobby for being able to do something like this, by the way. So we're the be careful what you wish for, you just may get it. And back in 2019, we kicked the can down the road, and here we are. We don't have a choice. This is a bitter pill, but we cannot defer the maintenance of the plant anymore. Otherwise, the plant at some point is going to fail, and we're going to wind up with fines because we're not doing our job, and it's going to be more money, and we're not going to get the benefit of the work that needs to be done. So one of the questions that is still remains, and it was asked by Commissioner Gruber, is, are all the utilities use the same tier plan that you're aware of regarding the 500 cubic feet versus
Using the same
tier
what?
plan? Conservational tier plan. Do we know that? Or
Surrounding utilities.
the surrounding utilities?
Yeah, we can double check that, but I'm pretty confident that everyone uses the tier.
Phyllis is shaking her head behind you saying no, so.
So all utilities use a tier system, whether it's 0 to 500 or 0 to 400 differs. For example, Fort Lauderdale, their first tier is a little bit larger than ours, but all utilities use a tier system.
I would like, number one, just so that we're informed, and the people that actually maybe take a longer shower and maybe not, or conserve more, so they know the difference between the 0 to 500 and the 500 to 750 or 500 to 1,000. And then above 1,000, I believe those are the tiers. We're 500 cubic feet per tier, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Okay, so please bring those numbers to us, or if you have them now, let us know what they are, so that, you know, even though we may or may not be able to adjust those tiers. And I understand it from the one-on-one that we had, that you are presenting to us a financing plan based on those tiers.
Yes,
So
sir.
if we change those tiers, the financing plan would change accordingly. So that may be something that we may be able to plug into the equation as to how to move forward. I don't subscribe to financing 60% because, number one, the bond rate is going to be higher. We're going to be carrying more debt, and we're basically kicking the can down the road on an interest rate that we are not going to be able to control. So that's something that, it's a bitter pill no matter what. Bless you. But one of the things that I also like to talk about that we haven't talked about is, are there any financing or grant opportunities for the low to moderate income areas in the city of Hollywood? Having one of the largest low to moderate income areas in the city of Hollywood, and a large area, part of it, that is not sewer, and the rates are going to hit them whether we get sewered or not. They'll double as we put in the sewers. I'd like to know if there is anything from the EPA or from the federal government or for the state government that would help us for those particular people. can we look into that if we haven't? Or if we have, please let us know.
Yes, we have, and we continue to apply for grants. So one of the issues we have as a city is with those customers with septic tank, it doesn't create a nutrient issue as per Florida Department of Environmental Protection. That will put us, for example, in the Springs area or certain areas who are receiving additional money or receiving money for septic to sewer. Unfortunately, in our case, we're not. We have applied for several grants for infrastructure to build or to replace or to do septic to sewer. We have not been successful, and I've gotten on the phone with FDEP and I've asked them why. We presented great applications. Actually, we have done a few with Phil Cook's team, and we have not been successful for that reason. It's our nutrient issue.
I understand, but those are applications that you asking for the conversion from septic to sewer. That's not what I'm asking here today. I'm asking if there are any federal or state programs to help the low to moderate income people to be able to afford this. In other words, do we have anything, or is that a new avenue that we can look, or if they even exist?
We'll work with Ryan, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, go ahead.
We'll work with Ryan Coote to see how he might be able to provide. He does have funding once the line is in and a resident needs to connect, he does have funding, but we'll have a continued conversation with him as to see how he could include funding for us in his 5-year plans and see how we might be able to provide support for us.
Okay, and that's just for the connecting part of it. But now I'm asking for something.
For
even-
the actual money to pay for it.
For the actual expense on a monthly basis. In other words, basically, we're looking for septic to sewer welfare system here, if one exists. If it doesn't exist, maybe a question that we can bring to our representatives on the state level and on the federal level as to, we are faced with this. How can we address this for the long term? Because it's a bitter pill. I don't think we have a choice but to make the decision. And the farther we kick it down the road, the more expensive it's going to get. I agree with Commissioner Biederman when he said we should have been doing this years ago, but we chose not to. And so we're a victim of our own decisions. And just like when we made the decision of going to the state to ask for them to allow us to charge the people that have sewer for the income in sewer system, we were granted that. Now we're faced with that, and we have to make a decision in order to make it happen. The unfortunate part is that I don't believe that we're going to be the only municipality that's going to be facing these things. This is something that is happening. This is a trend. When we look at $45 million to design a future septic to sewer system, we cringe. How can it cost $45 million for somebody to draw something in here? But that's the going rates, and that's the business, and that's what we face with. Do we have the ability to do it in-house? The answer is probably not. But this is something that in the long term, sometimes we pay a little more at the beginning, and we save quite a bit at the end. We don't have that. Go ahead.
I just want to remind you that we did receive a grant for Boulevard Heights. It's about $1 million. So we are working and will continue to work. We'll work with our Assistant City Manager, Adam, and any legislative or federal grants that we're able to apply for.
Okay, and I think all we're doing is discussing the same thing. I'm not going to belabor this anymore because the time is of the essence when it comes to all of us. It's a bitter pill. We don't have a choice. I mean, it's looking to cure the illness. So we don't really have much of a choice. But if we're going to just try to give directions, I would prefer the 50%. And the reason that I say that is because if we have any cost savings, we have the ability to adjust that. Yet if we finance the 60%, we're going to be committing to the bonds for that amount of money versus being able to decrease it with the 50%. That's just my thought process. I don't know if you wanted to add something.
So just for clarity, you're suggesting the 50% on the whole package, the core plus the septic to sewer planning?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go to Commissioner Quintana.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, many of my comments, Commissioner Hernandez said much of what I was going to say, but I'll just say from the onset that I would prefer the core plus the sewer at 50%. I know I talk to residents all the time, both in this role and my role at the county, who are struggling to make ends meet. And I've been saying to Vin every time we've received information on my one-on-one briefings that I'm very concerned about the number of people that will be displaced and will have to leave, because it's not just this particular increase in cost, but the increase in cost from FPL, the increase in cost from insurance, the increase in costs from property taxes, all combined. I know that many of our current residents will not be able to remain. And so I think the question that I had written down was, is there financial assistance available for residents unable to pay for the next 3 years? So whether that is because they have a large family or whether that is because they don't earn enough money to cover the cost of living here, is kind of, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Gruber in his case. He's talking about large families. I'm talking about people who are service workers, which are many of the people that I represent, and don't make enough money to live in Florida, South Florida at all. And so what I know is that in my job at the county, I routinely refer people for the LIHEAP program to help them pay for their electric bill. And so I did a quick Google search, and I found that there's a low-income household water assistance program, but it also says that they're no longer taking applications, which is the same issue with the LIHEAP program, that the federal government is cutting all kinds of programs to help people that have low income and eliminating such programs. So definitely, both to our state representative, Adam, and to our federal lobbyists, we need to have that be a priority to try to advocate for not to eliminate programs that assist people who have low income. That is a significant number of the people that we all represent up here on the dais. So that was kind of my number one thing, that needs to be a priority. And then I just also wanted to look at slide 6 again, very briefly, because I know I brought it up at the last workshop about the order in which things are happening, and I wanted to know about us addressing commercial areas that are currently unsewered. And so I wanted to better understand what that means on this slide.
Well, I'll call Phil Cook up to speak to it, but I think it's actually pretty well illustrated on this last slide here. You see the colored blocks, particularly the blue UCO2, I think, and you see those notches of uncolored area?
Yeah.
Those are all the commercial areas that we've already addressed. And I believe in the first phase,
I'm asking about what's commercial that is not yet addressed. Is there such a thing, and
I
where are
think
those?
to the east, well, I can't read the number, but it's one of the first ones you see.
And the reason I'm asking, of course, is because it seems to me like, again, we're looking for, part of the reason to convert to sewer is to increase the opportunity for us to support industry and business in our city, which can help us offset the cost and the burden on our residents. So the more we can get from our commercial properties, then we can take some of the burden off of our residential properties by having them help pay the cost of running our city, just to make that very plain. So it's important for us to make sure that our commercial areas are sewered so that we're not limiting our financial possibilities. Go ahead.
Good morning, Phil Cook, Hazen. Commissioner, if you look at the graphic shown there, the pink striped areas are your commercial and industrial areas. For the most part, a lot of those are already served with sewer. The ones that are not are targeted for the first phase, and the exception being what Vin Morello mentioned over on State Road 7. The properties abutting State Road 7 have already been addressed.
I'm well aware.
Okay, so So in that respect, the unsewered areas surrounding State Road 7 are addressed in the later years, but looking to the east, over near Dixie Highway, the UEO2 and UEO3, A and B, those areas are addressed earlier, specifically for that reason, because they're a target for commercial development. And so in the initial phases, that's where we're addressing.
So I guess that's my question is, why aren't the ones west also targeted for, because they're commercial also, and also opportunities for,
Yeah, that's true. They are, but the initial areas around State Road 7 were addressed because they are I guess, the more concentrated area. But those areas are very large and very expensive. So they were pushed later in the program because we had addressed already some of that commercial area. So essentially, it's kind of a domino effect. As you get more areas sewered, you're preferentially reducing the costs or spreading that burden out among more of your customers. So every area that gets sewered, you're bringing in that revenue, and that's going to help build and secure further areas for development.
okay. UC 10, where is that exactly?
That looks like that's around Washington, just below Hollywood Boulevard.
Is that Lawn Acres?
Lawn
I
Acres.
thought it was.
Yes.
Okay. And that's coming later. Okay. So I guess I already said kind of what the bottom line for what you guys are looking for with direction. For me, at the 50% and try to do all of it.
Thank you. Let's get to Commissioner Shuham.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly I agree with Commissioners Biederman, Hernandez, and Quintana. To me, things just cost more the longer you wait. And the reason we're in this predicament is because we waited. And so, for the simple looking out, not only for our residents of today, but our residents of the future, for me, waiting is not an option. And not only because it's mandated, much of it is mandated, but just, as Ray Lynn said, this is a fundamental obligation that the city owes to its residents, and it has to be paid for, and it is painful. So that's why I hear and agree with everything my colleagues have said. I would also say that, and I think Commissioner Caleri stepped out, but when we talk about the burden on current residents, we also, by proceeding or agreeing to proceed, we are saying to our residents, we are concerned with your property values. If we do nothing, then the property values of the city of Hollywood drop. Then we're not a good city to live in. Your house is worth less. So for people that own their homes, yes, this is going to hurt, but the property value that you have within your family will be worth more. And I think that's just one way we have to look at it, that we are trying to preserve typically the largest investment that anyone ever makes, and that's the home that they live in. And I think that it's a responsibility of the city to proceed in the best possible way to protect the investments of its residents, and we all have to, bear that cost. We are simply witnessing the negative impact of deferred maintenance. That's it. And so to put it off further cannot be a good thing. So it's pay now, pay later. It's always more expensive to pay later. I think that we all see that. So for me, and I think I'm looking at, let's see, slide 25, I believe. I want to try to understand why my colleagues are supporting 50%, 50% versus 60%. First of all, I am supportive of the Waterworks 2050. And I remember during our one-on-ones, Vin, that I think much of how we finance is not something that we have to give you direction about today. Is that correct? That things are going to be changing all the time?
Correct. As we advance, we'll know if we're going to get WIFIA loans, grants. Obviously, grants and appropriations will offset the amount that we'll have to bond. Obviously, when we do a bond report, that's, the bond issuer will give us options on, I think, rate and terms. And so those
Okay.
are the kind of fine details that will be
So
established.
what direction are you looking for from us today?
Well, I'll let Stan Tech speak up, but essentially it's this.
50 versus
50
60.
50
and
versus
core
60.
versus both.
Yeah. And that underlying rate will give us some foundation to move forward on the program. We'll be able to come back with a resolution with a 5-year rate plan that you'll be able to adopt that reflects that.
Okay. So, and this is where I'm getting confused, where some of my colleagues are saying 50% versus 60%. If you, like I said, I am supportive of the 2050 plan. And if I look at 50% versus 60%, the 50% is a higher cost.
We'd be borrowing a little more.
Yes.
On 50%, and the difference of the bill in the average typical household is $223 versus $205. So,
Right.
so
So, but when we had our one-on-ones, this is exactly what I thought did not have to be decided today, the 50 versus 60.
But if you had to pick a direction now, Commissioner Shuham, I mean, the savings on going to 60 is not that great.
I agree.
Increases the debt load and it reduces, financial flexibility later on.
Yes.
So I'm leaning toward the 50% myself.
Personally, I agree. I mean, the hit is so huge that, again, looking out for future generations of Hollywood, the 60% saves money. It saves a lot of money. It's like a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage. You're paying less per month, but in the long run, you're paying so much more over 30 years. So based on this chart, I personally support the 2050 plan at 50%.
Thank you.
50.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think there's a consensus on continuing to plan for septic and sewer, understanding that this 5-year plan does not pay for the implementation of all that, but at least
Yeah.
raises the.
And I'm sorry.
Sorry, if you didn't finish. Okay, go ahead.
Just lastly, I 100% agree with my colleagues with respect to any sort of financing programs that are available to our most vulnerable residents on a monthly basis, even things that we ourselves as a city could support through increases in other general fund locations that could be used to help residents that are struggling financially. And also, I've mentioned this before, there are other regions in Florida that are looking at septic to sewer through P3 programs, lots of infrastructure P3, things happening all around the country. And finally, when we talk about people being displaced, clearly that's our greatest concern. But I think it was the mayor who said that this is happening everywhere. So the goal is to treat our predicament in a way that is allowing the most people to stay and thrive and live here, but we can't just do nothing because nothing is not an option. It's simply not an option. So, and I just want to thank Vin, you and your team and your experts. It's a lot of information. I feel with each workshop, the presentations are easier and easier to digest. And so it's deeply appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. So all of the members of the commission have had a chance to provide their direction. Some others want to provide some final comments. So as I mentioned, Vin, city manager, for me, looking at this particular set of choices, the 50% and Waterworks 2050 is I think the preferred direction. I will say, though, before I'm ready to vote on a resolution approving this, I do want to see what a non-ad valorem assessment means from an equity standpoint, where all of the taxpayers in the city split the burden in a level way, and whichever way you would propose assessing, whether it's the square footage charge like we do the other non-ad valorem assessments for fire and what have you. What I want to see is an analysis on the impact, the annual impact to the household and the different businesses in the city, broken out similar fashion on the non-ad valorem assessment versus or a split non-ad valorem assessment versus utility bill impact. So we have a choice. I also want to see what the longer horizon means in terms of the costs here. I know we're looking at a 5-year snapshot of a 25-year plan, but I think we need to see the big picture. Stormwater master plan, wastewater plan, subject to sewer, in a broader horizon to see if we are embarking and have an outlook that's feasible to construct and feasible to finance and absorb over the 25 years and not just on a 5-year snapshot. So I just want to see the big picture. I want to see the alternative on the non-ad valorem assessment, if that results in a more equitable split, and then make a decision. Obviously, as you said at the outset, Vin, the $700 and some odd million of improvements to the plant are necessary. We don't have a choice based on you and all the consultants and the engineers that have been looking at the plant. And mind you, I still want to have that in-person visit. I know we all do. But I do want to end it with a challenge to say, and to clarify, and in my recollection, there is no time that the city commission, since 2016, when I was elected on to the commission, ever denied a request by you, the utility department, for further investment in capital improvements to the utility system. This is not the city commission kicked any can down the road. This is previous directors and staff who never spoke up to say, hey, we have an outlook of a substantial maintenance that's needed, and we need to start building up the reserve and the capital expense, and therefore we need this to be considered in the rates. We never denied a rate outlook, and so I just want that for the record to be said. But you're doing the hard part of speaking up and not just hiding what you're saying is a hidden threat unless you speak up and say we need to fix this.
No, Mr. Mayor, I was going to say my answer on that graph was not knowing, about the maybe the previous directors were more clever than I am.
Or maybe they didn't see.
Maybe they didn't
see the problem.
They didn't have the benefit of the reports, but.
Yeah. All right. So final comments, Commissioners Kaleri, Hernandez, and Biederman, and then it is almost 11. Go ahead.
So, Mayor, I just want to say thank you for speaking up and saying that, because a couple of our colleagues have said that we have kicked the can. If the urgency was brought to us and we knew that the safety factor, I think we've acted on a lot of different things. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because no way, shape, or form will we ever put the safety and the quality of water ever at risk for our residents, ever. Just that has to be so noted. And I know that there are keyboard warriors out there that will change the narrative, but I am putting it on the record. We would never have ever done that. In addition to that, I just really think, Commissioner Shuhan brought it up, but P3s are so important. And this is an opportunity, Fort Lauderdale has done something similar to this to cover the costs. That price tag just for design of $45 million to me is just unfathomable. And so P3s are so important. And while we get a lot of pushback with those as well, this is an opportunity that we can use to help save tax dollars to our residents. So I think that is something we really need to look into, and how important it is. Even, I'll probably get Rotten Tomatoes thrown at me, but even 1301, you put the money where you put the math to the money, that's going to save our tax dollars, our taxpayers' money. So these are big decisions that we make because we want to line our pockets, as we've been told, but we want to line our residents' pockets so that it's not coming out where they can afford to live. So I think it's something we really need to focus on and think of more opportunities that we have available to help get that on the books and help with the costs.
Let me just throw out a quick, Commissioner Cleary reminded me. There's discussion as to whether or not it's smarter to approach septic and sewer with design-build contracts with firms that are out there. Here, we're spending $45 million to design, and then there could be change orders and different things. Maybe it's better to have a design-build with septic and sewer contractors in the future, to where no one can point at the designer and say that you didn't see, you go to the site, and basically have change orders come up. So you don't have to respond now, but even though we're parking a $45 million design expense here, just please evaluate design build and how that changes things. Commissioner Hernandez.
Thank you. That's one of the points that I was going to make, the $45 million for design, because right now what we're doing is giving directive. We're not giving somebody a $45 million open door right now as far as that. So is that going to be work that is going to be bid out, or is that going to be work that it's already in the process of giving to somebody for it to design, if you have the answer for that?
Yes, sir. That is a budgetary level estimate for design work for $450 to $500 million worth of work. And the way it'll be procured is through the normal RFQ process to select consultants best qualified to do those designs.
Okay, so it'd be a request for qualification, and this is one of my issues that I have had, and I'm not saying it's going to happen here, but this is one of the issues that I have had in the past when it comes to a particular company getting over $300 million worth of work from all the CRA, when they were the ones that were being requests for qualifications, and the people that qualified them are the same people that rubbing elbows with them. I'm not saying that there was anything nefarious, but people are kind of question those process. So you can have qualified people, and then based on those qualifications, then you can have the work bid out. So you've already pre-qualified, let's say 3 or 4 vendors, and out of the 3 or 4 vendors, you can do that. And I'm not saying how to do the work, but I'm just saying when you qualify the same people that you work with, it always raises questions by the residents. That's just food for thought. My question was whether this was going to be something that we're going to move forward right away, but based on what you're telling us is this is going to be, just as the mayor said, parking the money for $45 million, and they go from there. I, too, was asked to consider P3s and design builds when it comes to something like this. So what we're basically asking or saying, given directive here, is go ahead and move with what the financing mechanism that we have. As far as the detail of the work, it remains to be seen, and see how we can move forward. The P3s take time, which Adam said to me, that could be lengthy in nature. Design build is different. We can actually have a contractor that says, we've done it on the city next door. We have an idea what the geographical area looks like. We know what the geos are. We can move this forward with this, and you can have a 10% back and forth with it, something like that. So how the work gets done, that remains to be seen. That's not what we're approving today. What we basically given directive is we prefer the 50% financing over the 60% financing. Am I clear on this?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, we're good with that, nothing further.
All right, last comment, and then we'll adjourn the workshop, is Commissioner Biederman.
So I'm going to reiterate, I support 60%. We've already raised stormwater. We've already raised a lot of other fees, so maybe it's only $18 a month average, but that's on top of stormwater and everything else that we've been raising. So I think that we have to be careful how much we raise everything. And if we could raise it a little bit less, then let's raise it a little bit less. That being said, I support the idea of design build. We've talked about it on other projects with the GO and everything else. So I think that it's a really good opportunity to try and save some money. There's got to be ways to save money. But a triple P in stormwater utilities and fresh water, I would never support that. First of all, do the words waste pro mean anything to anybody up here? It's the biggest mistake we've made in 20 years, probably. So to privatize our water supply and our sewer treatment is ridiculous. It's union busting, and it's unfair to our residents to possibly put those future costs on them.
Well, can I butt in? Because that didn't come out of my mouth. We're talking about the work of going from septic to sewer, not the plans.
I agree.
Well, I just want to make sure,
You're
because
talking about, somebody mentioned triple P.
Yeah, P.
And that's privatizing our wastewater treatment plant
That is-
and fresh water.
that is
When I
not
go to
what-
career day in schools, the biggest thing I talk about is how great our fresh water is, our potable water is, and how that's the first priority of our commission is to make sure that when they turn on that tap, they have the cleanest, freshest drinking water. So to put that in private hands is an absurdity.
I don't remember anybody here making that suggestion.
What does a triple P mean?
P3 regarding
What does
the
that
work-
mean?
the work that needs to be done.
Let's,
Yeah, let's,
Design, they have to make money off of it. That's taking over our water treatment plant. I understand the design build phase. Let's do a design build. But to privatize our sewer pipes, our utility system is crazy.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would I don't think anyone would want to pursue that.
yeah, just
let's
to
have-
be clear.
Sounds like that's
Yeah,
what
and I think
have,
we want to clarify on that and just let you know that,
Closing comments, then we'll adjourn.
yeah, there are some interesting financing mechanisms out there that do involve the private sector. And I think that that's what we're being asked to explore, not privatizing the system.
That's
So
the only
we'll-
way. But that's the only way to do
Well,
it.
I don't think so.
That's what it means. So be careful.
We,
what we're
we would
saying.
never though. So
You know, they
let's not-
privatized the speed lane on I-95. You know, they privatized. We privatized Waste Pro. That's something you got to be careful. And you know, I'm hearing that Fort Lauderdale did something. They're not happy with it. We all know Pembroke Pines utilities are privatized or quasi-privatized, whatever it might be. So I want to make sure that the public knows we're not looking to privatize their drinking water. It's crazy.
Indeed. All right, everyone. Well, City Manager, I think we've given you the direction on this current finance plan, at least consensus of how to pursue it, but yet also with those exploration of those other avenues on non-ad valorem, I'd like, and then looking at the longer horizon to make sure we're not missing the big picture before we say go on this. All right. Thank you all so much. To be continued.